Romans 2:28 and 29 is our next one. So the following passage seems to suggest in the New Testament that everyone is a Jew who is circumcised of heart. And the phrase circumcised of heart means they've approached God with their heart rather than through rule keeping and physical circumcision. They're circumcised of heart. Here's what it says, Romans 2:28 and 29. For no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly, nor is circumcision outward and physical, but a Jew is one inwardly. And circumcision is a matter of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter. His praise is not from man, but from God. Now here's some Bible study advice. When examining any biblical passage, we should first view it in its broader context. So when analyzing Romans 2:28 and 29, don't pull it out of the chapter, right? Consider it within the context of chapter 2. Then include chapter 3. And finally interpret it within the entire letter, all of Romans. And then afterwards, you're not done. Then you go to any possible Old Testament connections. There's a context which these verses fall in. Doing that little practice here will reveal that the audience Paul is directly addressing is very likely Jewish, not Gentile. And even those who might disagree with me on that point would have to agree that the topic, at the very least, involves Jewish customs, such as observing Torah and circumcision. So here's an example. Chapter 2, verse 17. But if you call yourself a Jew and rely on the law. 2:23. You who boast in the law. Jews, not Gentiles. And then chapter 3, verse 1. Then what advantage has the Jew? You can see the subject. But you have to read the broader context to see it. You can't just read 28 and 29. Now, since this verse addresses Jews who boast in the law and believe that they had an advantage, it may be helpful to look for an Old Testament connection. What's in their mind? What's already in their mind when they hear the words of Paul? The Old Testament. So when we do this, we'll see that circumcision of the heart was a requirement in Torah. It's not a New Testament idea. It's an Old Testament idea. Deuteronomy 10, 15 and 16. Listen to what this says. Yet the Lord set his heart and love on your fathers and chose their offspring after them, you above all peoples, as you are this day. Circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart and be no longer stubborn. This is a point from Torah. Jewish males were circumcised when they were 8 days old. And being 8 days old, you can imagine that this was not voluntary. They didn't choose it. This was done by law. It was the parents' way of showing they were raising their child as part of the community. It's the same thing we do with dedication. So it was the parent saying, I'm going to raise my kid, in this community. In other words, the parent is saying they are Jewish. And they would be raised to keep the Torah and the community rules. However, for the child, there would come a time when they would need to choose to follow Yahweh personally, to believe in the God of their fathers and their ancestors for their own, or on their own. Now, it doesn't take much reading, though, in the Old Testament, see that many Israelites in the Old Testament did not do that. Or at the very least, they turned away from their faith, right? So at that point, this is what I'm trying to get at. Their Jewish identity meant nothing in terms of their eternal inheritance. Nothing. In fact, in the Old Testament, on a national level, it didn't even guarantee their earthly inheritance. We can see that in the exiles. He exiled them from their land, right? Therefore, faith, being circumcised of the heart, is not a New Testament idea. It has always been the proper way to approach God, by faith through circumcision of the heart. So here's what Paul means. A true Jew is circumcised in the flesh and the heart. Paul isn't telling us how Gentiles become or replace Jews. He is explaining how Jews can truly honor their heritage and the God of their forefathers. A real Jew is not one who's merely one outwardly, but is also faithful. That's what Paul is trying to say. He's not telling Gentiles how to become Jewish. He's telling Jewish how to truly live Jewish, faithful to the God of Israel.